Philadelphia in 1974. On a quiet Philadelphia street stood a little workshop. In a small, quiet workshop, a man repaired shoes with the patience of a craftsman. Thread pulled through leather, hammer taps echoing through the walls. To the outside world, it was the sound of honest work. But behind closed doors, this familiar place hid something darker. A mind unraveling. A double life no one imagined. A shoemaker whose meticulous hands would one day plan murder. A trusted neighbor, a father, a craftsman, and a killer. To the neighbors, it smelled of polish, glue, and hard work. To police, years later, it would smell only of death and madness. His name was Joseph Callinger, a man who built souls for a living and lost his own soul along the way. Early life and origins. Joseph Callinger's story begins long before the crimes, in an unforgiving world shaped by displacement, poverty, and instability. He was born into an immigrant family in the mid-20th century, a neighborhood of narrow brick row houses, factory smoke, and small corner shops. People worked long hours, often for little. Families struggled. Children grew up quickly. Callinger was one of them. He was described as a quiet child, withdrawn, difficult to read, and often alone. Some remembered him as polite and soft-spoken. Others recalled sudden bursts of anger, moments that felt out of place in such a timid boy. Psychologists would later point to early indicators, behavioral tics, periods of isolation, and unusual fascination with tools, and an obsessive drive to fix things, even dismantle them. But in a working-class environment, struggles weren't unusual. No one suspected deeper problems. Shoemaking entered his life almost accidentally. By adolescence, he was apprenticed in a small workshop, absorbing its routines with a near-devotional focus. Leather, thread, needles, knives. Tools of discipline, but also tools that demanded control. This workshop gave him purpose, a skill, a way to be needed. But for troubled minds, precision can become obsession. And obsession can become something else entirely. His adulthood and the double life. As an adult, Callinger became known as the neighborhood shoemaker. Reliable, punctual, predictable. He lived in a tight-knit community where people borrowed sugar, watched each other's children, and trusted those who seemed stable. Friends described him as hard-working. Customers praised his skill. Neighbors waved to him every morning. But inside his home, a different picture was forming. His relationships were strained, punctuated by controlling behavior, outbursts, and disturbing inconsistencies no one knew how to interpret. Behind the calm exterior was a man battling inner torment, paranoia, delusions, and episodes of emotional volatility hidden behind a polite smile. This contrast, the craftsman and the chaos, set the stage for what was coming. Years before the crimes, small warning signs surfaced. Strange remarks, stories that didn't add up, moments where he seemed disconnected from reality. People brushed them off. He was eccentric but harmless. Until he wasn't. Callinger developed rituals, touching objects repeatedly, lining tools in perfect symmetry, working into the night for no reason except compulsion. He began distancing himself from others, then suddenly inserting himself into situations uninvited. Neighbors whispered that something felt off. Still, none of it seemed dangerous. Shoemakers weren't expected to be threats. The workshop, with its soft lamplight and steady rhythm of stitching, felt safe. Maybe that's why what came next was unthinkable. The first crime. The first known crime shattered the illusion. A break-in, an assault, a victim who survived barely, and described a man with calm eyes and mechanical movements. Investigators were stunned. The brutality contrasted with the careful, methodical behavior of the attacker. It was violence mixed with precision. But there were no leads, no clear motives, just an unsettling realization. Whoever did this planned it. For months, the case stalled, and Killinger continued his life as if nothing had changed. Footsteps back and forth from his workshop, leather scraps on the floor, customers picking up repaired shoes, until the second crime, and then the third. Each incident followed a disturbing pattern, not impulsive, not chaotic, but orchestrated. Police knew they were dealing with someone who planned meticulously, someone who understood routines, someone who blended in. But no one suspected the quiet shoemaker. Experts later described Killinger as a man split between two worlds. The craftsman, methodical, precise, bound by rules of his trade, and the predator, obsessive, calculating, driven by fantasies of dominance and control. Shoemaking in many ways mirrored his inner mind, cutting, shaping, bending materials into what he wanted, restoring order to objects while losing control of himself. His crimes reflected these same themes: discipline, ritual, control. This psychological duality became a cornerstone of the eventual trial and an explanation for how he lived undetected for so long. Over several months, a string of attacks shocked the region. Families were terrorized inside their own houses. One tragedy left a young life lost and a city frozen in disbelief. The final crime and arrest. On January 8, 1975, Joseph Killinger and his son Michael broke into a home in Leonia, New Jersey, initiating the incident that ultimately led to his arrest 9 days later. The home invasion in Leonia, New Jersey. Killinger and Michael gained entry to the home of DeWitt Romaine by posing as a salesman. Hostages. Once inside, they held 8 people hostage at gunpoint and knife point. The victims were tied up using cords cut from lamps and blinds, and many were forced to strip. Maria Fashing, a 21-year-old nurse, arrived at the house to check on an elderly, bedridden neighbor. When she refused to follow Killinger's orders, he took her to the basement, where he stabbed her 24 times in the throat and back, killing her. During the hours-long ordeal, one of the bound hostages managed to get outside and call for help. When police sirens were heard approaching, the Killingers fled the scene on foot, abandoning their weapons and a bloody shirt along the way. They then took a bus to the George Washington Bridge Terminal in New York City. The clue and arrest. When detectives began connecting the dots, they found an impossible accomplice: Joseph's 13-year-old son, father and child. The Leonia police also found the discarded blood-stained shirt near the crime scene. The trace. Inside the collar of the shirt was a manufacturer's trademark, a store label,
and a laundry stamp. Investigators traced the shirt through these labels to a specific dry cleaner and store in Philadelphia. The dry cleaner identified the shirt as belonging to Joseph Callinger, a local cobbler who ran a shoe repair shop below his apartment. The name was even slightly misspelled on the label, Callinger, because the machine couldn't fit all the letters, a detail confirmed by the cleaner. With Callinger's identity confirmed and fingerprints from a previous child abuse arrest in file, police matched his prints to those found at a separate robbery in Pennsylvania. On January 17, 1975, police arrested Joseph Callinger and his son Michael at their Philadelphia home. The trial, psychology, and public reaction. The trial was a clash between two narratives. The
prosecution portrayed him as a cold, calculating predator. The defense argued severe mental illness, lifelong trauma, and psychosis. Psychiatrists testified for hours, dissecting his inner world, a world shaped by fear, control, delusion, and detachment from reality. Doctors testified about schizophrenia. Prosecutors pointed to planning and cruelty. The jury saw both, intelligence and delusion, locked in the same man. The verdict? Guilty. Life imprisonment. His son was placed in a youth facility. The town exhaled, but quietly, because the story didn't end with the sentence. The public was torn. Some saw a monster. Others saw a deeply disturbed man failed by society long before the crimes. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the verdict brought closure, if not comfort, to the victims and their families. Callinger was sentenced and removed from society for good. The question is, what makes a man like Joseph Callinger? Childhood trauma, mental illness, or a perfect storm of both? For decades, psychologists have debated, but no theory can truly explain the moment when empathy dies. The story of Joseph Callinger is not just about crime. It is about the fragile boundary between ordinary life and unseen darkness. It is a reminder that evil can be quiet, skilled, and hidden in plain sight. But it also shows the persistence of investigators, the resilience of survivors, and the importance of recognizing warning signs long before tragedy strikes. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, and remember, monsters aren't always strangers.
Subscribe now to Criminals Chronicles and join a community of true crime enthusiasts who can't get enough of the world's most twisted tales. Hit that bell, bing, because in this world, truth is stranger than fiction. True Crime Chronicles. Subscribe for more real-life investigations.